And good day, everybody. Hi, I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome to the SMART podcast, where S stands for self care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive learning, R for rhythmic operations, T for a thriving community, and of course, performance around the key metrics. I am so happy to have Dr. Robin Buckley back with me for a second time. Our first conversation was all about cognitive behaviors, the amygdala, fight or flight, and I would highly recommend you to go back and look at that as well. But something caught my eye, really my ear, at the end of our conversation when we started talking about partnering. Partnering in business is exceptionally important, but there's a real relevance to what partnering at home is as well. And that's where the conversation will go today. And I promise you, as always, there'll be key takeaways that you can implement today to change those habits and behaviors that give you the results that you desire. Robin, welcome back. Why don't you give a quick introduction to remind everybody who you are, to establish the credential, and then dive right into talking about what you are so passionate
So great to see you again, Walter. So my background is I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I have done executive coaching. And then in recent years, really dove into doing couples coaching with very high performance couples. So it's helping them create as much success in their relationship as they're used to in their careers and their businesses.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. I often refer back to Gary Kaplan's book about the five love languages that, and it's always, we laugh about it, the men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Men think like have a brain that has boxes versus a woman having more of a web. And I don't want to overgeneralize that everybody is the same. But the message is that it is key to be successful at work and at home is to learn about each other. So tell us a little bit about your approach, what your insight is, and how we can make a difference.
Yeah. One of the things that drives me crazy, Walter, is that we plan so much in our lives. We plan our careers, we plan our finances, we plan our vacations, we meal plan. And yet when it comes to our relationships, we wing it. We hope and pray and have faith that it'll work out. And I just don't understand why. We would never leave anything important in our life to chance, but we do that in our relationships. So in the work I do with couples, I help them take really well-known business principles and apply it to their relationship, not to make the relationships robotic or rigid, but to give it structure and to give it a clear direction so that they do achieve success. Because we know the divorce numbers. We know that relationships are ending at least half the relationships end in divorce or in the relationship dissolving. Why would we want to keep doing things the same way that we were always taught to do, which is you just go into it blind instead of having a plan? And so the work I do with couples really helps them create a plan with very concrete approaches.
Yeah, excellent. So I always say that at the foundation of a highly effective leader needs to be stability around mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, relationship wellness, and financial wellness. So the first admission we need to make is that I need help. So where do you start with somebody? How do you can get somebody to admit that, listen, I need help from a couple counselor, from somebody like yourself, to be able to become a better version of myself, a better version of a couple together.
Great. I think it's asking in a very vulnerable way, are you happy? Is this the relationship you've always dreamed about? Because I know at the beginning of relationships, they're idealized. They're in the honeymoon stage. But over time, life, busyness, routine gets in the way and it creates a disconnect between couples. And so it's just making that first. And I think it's the hardest step is saying, are we really where we want to be? Are we really as happy as we can be? And one thing I really impress upon couples is when they say to me, Robin, we just want to get back to how we used to be. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to help you do that. You can't go backwards. You don't want to go backwards. You've evolved as individuals, hopefully. So you want to get to a new dynamic in your relationship that might take some of the good things from the past, but that transform it into where you're going in the present and then where you want to get to in the future.
So I think that the key is communication. Right? I always say
Oh
the
gosh,
three
yeah.
most likely failures of any relationship, business or personal, is failure to communicate, and of course, failure to communicate. So, how do you guide two people to come together and learn how to communicate effectively?
Yeah. So this is going to sound really simplistic, Walter, but it works really well for couples because it is so simple. Communication, you are 100% right, is probably I would put my career on the fact that that is the end point for a relationship when communication is not happening. And for a lot of couples, I can start them down that path, but they're hard. They're either raw with emotion or they're not comfortable doing the communication with their partner. So I start them off with something simple, which is assigning chores, which sounds crazy. And couples are like, Robin. I'm like, no, really, because it's tangible and it is the function and logistics of your home. So if you can actually have a conversation of, I'm going to take care of this, but this is one thing I really hate doing. Would you mind doing it? That's how communication, but it has a goal. So it frames it and it's easier because you're not getting into emotion. You're not getting into some of the pain points in the relationship. You're simply taking care of the logistics. And when couples can practice around assigning chores, and this is not, Walter, if we were in a relationship, Walter, you're going to do A, B, C, and D. That's not what it looks like. It's a conversation about what are my preferences? What are my strengths? What are your strengths? And how can we use all of that to really understand how we're going to move forward, again, from a logistical standpoint? Once couples do that for a few weeks at least, they get more comfortable just having conversations about their wants and their needs in the relationship, again framed around chores. From there we start to talk about how to make sure communication happens daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And that's where it starts to really branch out into the bigger issues and strengths within the relationship.
Yeah, very interesting. It is what do you say? Assumptions sink large ships,
Mm,
and that is the danger. Is that especially in today's society where things happen so quickly and we have access to information so quickly, our expectations are equal. So if we talk
yes.
about chores and you say, well, this I'll clean the toilets, but you come home and nobody's happy about it because it was really about the hair on the floor for the dogs, not ever about the toilet. It's where that really comes into play. So building on that. So finally, you're starting to build new habits and behaviors. You're having regular dialogue. You're having those check-ins. You're starting to get onto the same page. But ultimately speaking, in a high performance couple, a high performance employee, they want to become synergistic, right? They need to be able to feed off each
Mhm.
other for a common good. Well, how do you take that to that next level?
Yeah, so we build on as you said, the communication and the trust that comes from saying, "Hey, I'll take care of this, you take care of this." Now you have trust that the things that we've decided to do and take care of are going to be taken care of. So we build on that and we set up, or I encourage couples to set up again on their calendars. So it is scheduled, it is defined, these check-ins. So daily check-ins are short. They're 5 to 15 minutes where you're just sitting with your partner and it's just the sole purpose is for connection. So you ask them one simple question. What was the highlight of your day? What's something that was a challenge for you that maybe I could help you with? What was something I did that you really appreciated? One question each. It doesn't have to be the same question. Could be whatever works for a couple, but it's getting to that connective piece. So we're not talking about logistics. We're not talking about problems. We are just connecting for 5 minutes. Then you build in a weekly check in that's about 20 minutes where you do talk about logistics. Hey, what's coming up? My husband and I just did this over the weekend where I was like, hey, our dog has a vet appointment. I thought I was going to be able to bring her, but now I have a meeting that popped up. Can you take her? So it allows you to have that dedicated time to work out the schedule for the upcoming week. So that, again, you're both on the same page, you've communicated, there's no last minute surprises, and the functioning of your relationship is going smoothly. The biggest piece to me is the monthly check ins where you're meeting with your partner. I encourage an agenda so that nobody is blindsided by a new topic, and you are discussing everything that makes your relationship function. So, this is a financial overview, it's a sex and intimacy overview, it is discussion around any dependents, so pets, kids, elderly parents. but it's really the state of how the organization of your relationship is going. So you can make decisions together. And again, you're not one, and I don't know if you have this, Walter, but I see it all the time with couples where they're trying to have these conversations as they're passing each other in the kitchen. And then people get irritated and frustrated because they're not in that mindset to have a kind of deep conversation when they're trying to make dinner. And then the last check-in is quarterly. So just like businesses get to do quarterly retreats, it's a combination of the state of the future of the relationship, how we're going to hit our long-term goals, as well as connection, that really ingrained, dedicated time with each other away from real life. And I tell people, it might not be, you might not have the luxury of getting away for a whole weekend, but maybe an 8-hour day where half of it is devoted to logistics and conversations around strategy. And then the other half is dedicated to team building.
While leaving your cell phone at home. Needless to
Yes,
say,
that would be lovely.
that is the largest disruptor and noisemaker of all of us. So
Hmm.
inevitably, and I think this is really a wonderful idea and an approach to that. Inevitably, especially when you have people pleasers, people please rather than really address their needs and their wants and their deeper desires. Or there might be disagreement, which is very common. And people build that resentment up over time. So I love the fact that daily check-in. I call it pillow talk, right? That daily meaningful the connection.
Yeah.
I even love at the dining room table with the family to do the rose, the thorn, and the stem approach,
Hmm.
just to have dialogue without any intervention around that stuff. But then there's disagreement. So how do you propose to have a difficult conversation and set it up for success rather than
Mm,
generating more resentment?
right. So again, when we have conversations in the workplace, we usually come in with some strategies and a plan of how we're going to organize. We have an SOP, a standard operating procedure of how communication happens at work, because we understand there needs to be respect. Both sides need to be heard. There needs to be just a workable communication. And then we come home and we throw all of that out the window, which boggles my mind. So, same thing at home. Create your SOP for communication. What does it look like? First of all, where are you going to have the conversation? Is it better to have it at the dining room table, or is it better to have it in bed? Not usually where I recommend having disagreements, but for some couples it's more comfortable. It actually drops their defenses. How long is the conversation going to be? You say it ahead of time. What I usually recommend is if a disagreement is going longer than 30 to 40 minutes, it's probably time to table it, because emotions start building in at that point in time. And there's no harm in taking a break and resolving it, committing to each other that you're going to pick up the conversation again. This is not avoiding it. It is simply taking advantage of rational thinking in the moment. And then one of the most concrete strategies I suggest to couples is they create a safe word. So we've heard about safe words when it comes to sex and intimacy, and it has a similar purpose where a safe word allows one or both members of the relationship to say, hey, things are starting to go off track. Let's take a break and let's follow our SOP for the break. So it might be we're going to take 15 minutes. We're each going to go to separate areas of the house. We're going to do something that calms, each of them respectfully calms them down. And then we're going to get back together. We're going to meet in the living room in 15 minutes. But the safe word, I usually tell couples that the best types of safe words are ones that are based on a happy or funny memory from their relationship. Because when one of them says, in my relationship, the safe word is seagull, because we had a gigantic seagull that kind of blocked the proposal my husband had planned. And I don't like birds, so a big seagull was not comfortable for me. So when I say seagull, when we're having a conversation that is starting to build in emotion, we both stop. But when I say the word, it connects us. It reduces the cortisol, the stress hormone, and it starts to build the oxytocin, which is our hormone that builds connection. Because I've said one word that brings us back together around a moment in our relationship that was really enjoyable. It makes us both smile. We might not smile in the moment because we're both still stressed out, but our brain is smiling. And that gets us closer to reconnection when we come back to continue our conversation.
Really interesting concept and ideas and things that are very practical, right? They don't cost anything. It's just making a commitment
Mhm.
from some alignment. So to
Exactly.
close out the conversation, I think it would be remiss if we don't address that. Men and women are different. Our chemistry
Mhm.
is different. Our thinking is different. So from your experience, talk a little bit about how does a typical, and I mean, I don't want to generalize, how does a typical man look at the world versus how a woman looks at the world? And how can we bring that together in some of the things that obviously you have outlined already?
Yeah. Again, and I don't mean to be redundant, Walter, but when we look at a team and in a corporation or business, we create teams, ideally as effective leaders, that have a variety of people that have different strengths and have strengths that can potentially balance out the struggles or the weaknesses of other people on the team. That's how I look at relationships. Yes, men and women are different from their biology, their brain structure, their chemistry. We are different entities. But that doesn't mean that we can't rely on each other to really create a very well balanced relationship. So my husband does tend to have, stereotypical male characteristics of logic, and he has an incredible control over his emotions. And that's really helpful when some of my more stereotypical feminine characteristics of being very emotional, being very verbal, start to derail a conversation. He is able to calmly step in, remembering our strategies, sometimes faster than me, to bring down the emotional level. On the flip side, because of that, he doesn't always connect really well with people, especially in social situations. So I become the social bubble where I am making the connections and giving him the space to get comfortable so that he can start to make his own connections authentically. So when we look at these differences, I choose to teach couples to look at them as a way to create true harmony within the relationship, because I know he's going to take the lead in certain situations because those are where his strengths are. And he also knows I'm going to take the lead in other situations because that's where my strengths are. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, 100%. I think it really is comes down to that common bond and common understanding, build on trust and teachability, right? It is
Yes.
that, and if we
Yes.
keep those four things in balance and in check, there's a great video that I use sometimes in the communication. YouTube, go just type in "woman with a nail in the head." I'm not sure if you have seen it, but it is a phenomenal representation of our conversation, where men tend to want to fix things that we see without really deeply understanding the emotions behind the feelings. That's how we're programmed. We want to solve problems without really quite understanding what the root cause of the problem is. Maybe check out that clip. It really, really, really is interesting.
I will.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom that you can share, or where can people start, and what are the first couple steps, just to reiterate, of what they can do to get this emotion?
Yeah, let's start by assigning chores. Let's just see what happens with that. Remembering that this is not one dictating what the other does. It's a conversation about what would you like to do? Where do you think your strengths are in terms of how you can contribute to the house and the relationship? And from there, building on the trust that comes from the chores getting accomplished, building in those four levels of check-ins: weekly, daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And consider the idea of how do you structure each of those so they achieve the goal that each one has for the relationship. And then certainly when you are looking at your relationship, don't be afraid to take some of those really powerful strategies from our business world and apply it to your relationship. And if you have any trouble with that, just pick up my book because it goes through a lot of the ways that you can take these business principles and apply them for just as much happiness and success in your relationship as you have in your career.
Yeah, I think those two are very much interconnected to each other. You can be successful in one if you're not successful in the other area, and there's struggle on both areas. The key is to say, "I need some help," or "I'm struggling. We are
Yes,
struggling." So, where can people find you, and how can they get a copy of your
sure.
book?
Absolutely. So the book is available on Amazon, and the book is Marriage Incorporated, The Boardroom Blueprint to a Lasting Love. You can also find it on my website, which is drrobinbuckley.com. And I am on a lot of social media platforms. So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, as well as a host of others. So please check me out. I'd love to have conversations with people, especially people who really can't wrap their brain around this and push back. Those are the most fun.
Dr. Robert Buckley, it is absolutely a pleasure for 2.0. I hope we'll look forward to maybe even having a 3.0 in the future. Thank you for your time. This is certainly value added to anybody who picks up this episode. And I look forward to having future conversations. Great work. And this is really deeply
Thanks.
meaningful work to many people who struggle with this,
Thank you.
knowingly or unknowingly. Thank you very much. And we'll talk soon again.
Thanks, Walter.
All right.